It looks like after a long dormant period, we are now one step closer to actual transparency as far as the Epstein files are concerned. So Glenn, can you talk through what we can expect in the aftermath of a successful ruling in Katie Fang's lawsuit against the DOJ?
Yeah, Brian, the presiding judge, Judge Emmett Sullivan, is calling Todd Blanche to the carpet. More precisely, he's hauling him into court in just a couple of days because Todd has got some splaining to do. Because Judge Sullivan issued an order, actually two orders, one in June and one in July, directing that Todd Blanche provide some of the unredacted Epstein files and some of the documentation behind the decision that prompted Todd Blanche to make some of those, let's just generously call them highly questionable redactions. And guess what? Todd Blanche blew it off. He didn't do it. He defied Judge Sullivan's order. You would expect better from an acting attorney general, particularly one who is hoping to be the permanent attorney general. I mean, this is just a level of abdication of the responsibilities of an attorney general beyond anything you can make up. So Judge Sullivan said, okay, Todd, then I'm setting a hearing. You're going to get your butt into court. You're going to bring me the materials. I'm going to set some deadlines for you. This feels like Judge Sullivan walking Todd Blanche in the direction of contempt of court if he doesn't straighten up and fly right. Now, frankly, I hate that we give these dirty DOJ officials so many bites at the complying with orders apple, but this is where we are. So let's break it down. There are three categories of things that Todd Blanche has basically, thumbed his nose at the court when the court has ordered him to provide these things. Category one, and this is all from the brand new order just issued by Judge Sullivan. The first category involve documents that Todd Blanche made a whole bunch of redactions from. And he claimed that these redactions were all of victims' names or victims' personal identifying information. But here's the problem. Judge Sullivan ordered that Todd needs to provide to the court for private review in chambers, called in-camera review, the backing documentation. Because if a name is redacted and the name is Jane Smith, and Todd Blanche says, oh, Judge Sullivan, just take my word for it, Jane Smith is a victim. Judge Sullivan said, Todd, I'm not taking your word for it. I need the damn documentation because you have no presumption of regularity. The judge didn't say that, but that is the inference if you read between the lines. So he didn't bring the documentation. Now he's being hauled into court due to that failure, that defiance of the court order. And here's something I want to bring to everybody's attention in category one. Todd Blanche actually said, well, some of these people are victims, or some of these people had lawyers that asked us to designate them as victims. Can I play that out for just 30 seconds, Brian?
Yeah.
If Prince Andrew's lawyer said, I would like you, Todd, to designate my client as a victim, did Todd do it? If Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer, who happens to be a friend of Todd Blanche's, said, you know what, in an abundance of caution, let's just go ahead and label Ghislaine Maxwell as a victim. So if you wouldn't mind redacting her name out in some places that might be particularly damaging, I'd appreciate that, buddy. I don't know if that went on, but boy, that is the flavor of the game that Todd Blanche seems to be playing. That's category one. Category two is even worse, arguably. Category two involves a 13-year-old victim who was repeatedly interviewed by the FBI 4 times. Inferentially, it seems she was found to be credible. And the only thing Todd provided were some formal write-ups, some typed-up reports about what all those interviews involved. And then Todd, is playing a little bit of a shell game because he tells Judge Sullivan, well, all of the, I think, dozens, like 30s or 40s pages of handwritten notes of all of the interviews of this 13-year-old victim who, by the way, reported that Donald Trump sexually and physically assaulted her some years ago. All of those handwritten notes are, and I quote, duplicative of what ended up in the few typed reports that we did provide. And because it's substantially similar, what's in the handwritten notes and what's in the typewritten reports, and duplicative, we're not going to give any of it over. You know what Judge Sullivan said? And this is just brilliant. He said, well, you know what, Todd? There have been other disclosures that you actually have made from the Epstein files in which you affirmatively say, we're giving you document number 1 and we're giving you document number 2, which is substantially similar to document number 1 and duplicative, but we're going to give them both to you anyway. Brian, why is Todd Blanche willing to give substantially similar and duplicative documents over publicly when they have nothing to do with Donald Trump, but when they have everything to do with a direct allegation by a victim against Donald Trump, they pull out the substantially similar and duplicative excuse to not give over the good stuff, the more complete stuff that in real time was being recorded as the victim was sharing her experiences with the FBI. And Judge Emmett Sullivan was having none of it. He said, no, 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 you will bring the damn documents. He didn't say damn, but I can't help myself. There's a third category. That third category, again, this is so transparently in violation of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Judge Sullivan said, listen, the law says, the federal law that's on the books says that you must publish in the Federal Register for all to see the basis of any redaction you made. Brian, do you know Todd Blanche hasn't published a single entry in the Federal Register of any of the who knows how many hundreds or thousands of redactions he has made? That's just blatantly in violation of the federal law and has been every day since the deadline of December 19. Here's what Todd Blanche actually said in his own defense. He said, Judge, you know, there is no deadline for us to publish the reasons for these redactions in the Federal Register. And Katie Fang and her lawyers tended to disagree and said, actually, the deadline set in the federal law was December 19 for all of this. So the judge said, okay, so there's a dispute, Todd, as to the deadline. You come on in, get your butt into court, bring all the documents that you have thus far defied my order and refused to produce, and I'll go ahead and set a deadline for you. How about that? So I'm taking liberties here just for emphasis, but you know, these are the three categories of things that Judge Sullivan said directly. You failed, you defied my orders, you're going to comply now or else. So stay tuned, because in the coming days, we're going to have that. They're going to have that hearing. I'm going to be in court to, monitor it all in real time and then jump on with you immediately upon the conclusion of the court hearing so we can bring it all to our audience, in real time, including the color commentary from inside the courtroom.
And again, for those who are watching, to stay on top of this stuff as it breaks, because Glenn will be in that courtroom, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. Glenn, it's worth asking here, obviously Todd Blanche is in that position having had no intention of releasing any more files. As you mentioned, rightly, the date that all of these files were supposed to be released was December 19th, 2025. It is now August of 2026, so this is going on 9 months, 9 months that these files were supposed to be put out there. The administration also offered up some commentary that basically suggested that any Epstein file stuff went out the door with Pam Bondi, that she was responsible for everything. Now that Todd Blanche is in, clean slate, they don't have to worry about this anymore, and nothing else has to be released. The Epstein files matter is shut as far as Todd Blanche is concerned. So clearly they have every intention of continuing to suppress all of this. Is there going to be any way for Todd Blanche, maybe using his position as acting attorney general, or who knows, maybe attorney general by then, to not comply with Judge Sullivan's order that demands that he come in, that demands that he offer up the quote-unquote duplicative documents that aren't actually so duplicative, or this idea that, he can categorize co-conspirators or accomplices as victims? I mean, is there any way for him to be able to kind of undermine this whole process because of the position that he holds?
There are a couple of ways. One, he can continue to defy judicial orders, and he can basically challenge the court into forcing him to comply or holding him in contempt. Let me tell you, don't sleep on Judge Sullivan. I could launch into any number of stories. I appeared before Judge Sullivan. I have enormous respect for him. But he was as hard on federal prosecutors as he was on any other attorney, civil, criminal, who appeared before him, because he expects the best from us, as he did when I was a federal prosecutor appearing before him. So he will work in the direction of holding Todd Blanche accountable if he continues to defy orders. Or Todd Blanche can just kind of try to take endless appeals of each and every order issued by Judge Sullivan. I don't know how far that will get him. And let me just comment on what you said at the beginning of the question, where because Pam Bondi left the Department of Justice, the Epstein files disclosure obligations under federal law are somehow over. Well, there are a couple of things that contradict that. One, Pam Bondi told Congress, I turned this whole dang thing over to Todd Blanche. He was in charge of the whole Epstein files, compliance issue. So I don't, that dog won't really hunt. The other thing, saying that somehow if a new attorney general comes in, all existing legal obligations under federal law are somehow extinguished or mooted out because now there's a new attorney general. I don't know. Do defendants get to say, oh, well, I wasn't successfully prosecuted under the last attorney general, and now that there's a new one, I guess my case is over. Come on, Todd. It doesn't work that way, and he knows that. So I think what this is ultimately going to come down to is a bit of a pissing contest between the court and the Department of Justice, between Judge Sullivan and Todd Blanche. And what I can tell you is that Judge Sullivan don't play. And if he has to hold Todd Blanche in contempt, and this thing finally comes to a head with our first contempt proceedings in court, Judge Sullivan is up to that task. But let's see what happens at this next court hearing. And my hope, quite frankly, Brian, is that ultimately Judge Sullivan will say, listen, Todd, I've caught you defying my orders so many times or playing games once I did get my hands on the underlying documentation because it tends to contradict what you told me. I'm ordering the Department of Justice to produce to a special master all of the Epstein files, and that special master and a team that I put in place to assist the special master will see how much stuff you may have unlawfully retained to protect goodness knows who. I hope that is kind of the end game for this litigation.
Last question on this. Let's say Judge Sullivan does move forward with a ruling like that. Is there any way for Todd Blanche to immediately appeal this up to ultimately the Supreme Court to try and offer some temporary restraining order or injunction against having to comply with Judge Sullivan's order?
Never say never. So the answer is yes, he can try. And ordinarily a judge saying, listen, I have lost confidence in a Department of Justice that has been defying my orders and making misrepresentations to me. And a court has significant discretion to require the government to produce things privately in camera to be shared with nobody, including the defense. Mind you, there was an earlier ruling when the judge said, I want you to provide me some of these materials privately in camera in my chambers, not for public consumption. And Katie Fang's lawyers actually took the position, Judge, we would like to be included in that so we can at least see. We will sign a protective order, meaning we can't disclose it publicly beyond our defense team. And Judge Sullivan said to Katie Fang and her lawyers, no, I, as the judge, will be looking at this privately. Why? And this shows what a good jurist he is, what a good judge he is. Why? Because maybe there are things that you shouldn't see because they were appropriately redacted. So you're not going to be part of that process just yet. That shows that, the judge is really thoughtfully going about this and protecting the rights of both parties. But ultimately, Brian, DOJ can always try to appeal first to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and then to the Supreme Court. I don't think this is the kind of issue that should have any traction, but with today's largely compromised 6-justice right-wing majority, never say never.
Well, of course, this issue is really fast-moving. We'll have some answers here in less than a week. As Glenn mentioned, he'll be in the courtroom on the 13th as these proceedings move forward. So if you'd like to follow along and hear more of our legal analysis, the best way to do so is to subscribe to both of our channels. It's 100% free, but again, a great way to support our work and support independent media. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.